how is God uniquely present there?
It's something I've struggled with pretty much all my life.
My question to you is, how do I bring them back into the church?
Transition from thinking, I have done everything that I can do, to realizing that anything that you can do is already by the grace of God.
I have one question. If there is a sin in life that I'm going through that is absolutely bothering me, and I need the grace of God to take care of it, and there's no other way necessarily for me to do anything else more than I've already done. It's one of those situations where, um, with one of the bigger sins that I'm dealing with, necessarily there's a lot of struggles I go through, but I'm not able to do anything. I've done everything I can, and I still struggle against that sin. When will the grace of God kick in?
When will the grace of God kick in
Yeah.
after you've done everything that you can do?
I've done everything necessarily.
Yeah. Okay. So, first thought is transition from thinking, I have done everything that I can do, to realizing that anything that you can do is already by the grace of God. So, the grace has already kicked in because you are already doing that. Perhaps, as the fathers of the church say, the sin is allowed to continue because of one's own humility for that necessity. Perhaps the sin is allowed to continue because in this struggle, God is forming you even to greater heights afterwards. Or perhaps the sin is allowed to continue because of our own pride. So we may do everything that we can, that we are able to do, but our own pride comes and uproots all those things that we have done, all that work that we have done, and removes it altogether. I wouldn't be so concerned about having the sin removed, to be honest. Sometimes, again, what St. Porphyrius says, we focus so much on the sin and darkness instead of focusing on God and the light. Focus on Christ. He will remove that. Only Christ can heal the passions. Only Christ can remove all these deeply enrooted, embedded sins that are within us. Okay, if we fall, we fall. Just get right back up. Okay, you sin, big deal. In the presence of Christ's love and his mercy, it is almost irrelevant. As long as you don't stay in the sin, as long as you don't stay in the mud and the vomit that you've produced, just get up, repent, go back to Christ. Focus on him. Everything else will be taken care of.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Father.
Yeah, you're welcome.
First of all, thank you for the recommendation. It's a great book.
Yes, isn't that book amazing?
It is. I think it is. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. I've gotten halfway through it. I really can't put it down. I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't like reading, to be honest, but
I'm
it's
so
short,
glad.
and that's important for me because too much,
Yeah.
too long is not good.
No worries.
So I have 10 minutes, so I have to try to use as best as I can. So I have 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. I'm a fireman. I was a fireman and a paramedic, so weekends were difficult for me, right? So I also, a piece of me wanted my children to find the faith because I think our faith is beautiful, 100%. I'm biased, obviously, but I wanted them to come to it. My goal is to bring the kids back into. They're baptized in the Orthodox Church. We've practiced some of the key aspects of our faith, prayer and walking in good faith, treating people kindly. My question to you is, how do I bring them back into the church, as seamlessly as possible to integrate them into a faith that they chose, that wasn't imposed on them, which is important for me.
Yeah. So I don't have 16, 18, 16 and year olds. My children are 4 and 1. So what I will share comes from that experience, and then just from the experience of my own of youth ministry that I've done, the few years that I've done that as well. First and foremost, when you have young children, before they leave your home, they're under your care. You know that as a father, as a mother, as anyone who, as a parent. Never treat church as though it is a chore, even if it's forced, quote unquote, forced for you to go to church as a family. Therefore, what I mean to say by that is that whether they're young or a little bit older, church is just something that you do as a family. Just like family meals, it's just something that you do as a family. You don't question it, right? You don't question when, Like if kids questions like, do I really have to eat this? Well, yeah. I mean, eating is just part of what we do. Like, it's not,
Right.
you want to survive, you have to eat. You want to go to,
Mhm.
you want to survive spiritually, you have to go to church. And we do that together as a family. Now, it's a little bit more challenging to do that when they're a little bit older, right? They're in their teenagers. My suggestion, as much as you can, begin to fall more in love with Christ. You. Bring them to church by you bringing yourself to church, right? Number one. Number two, when you're at home, pray as you can as a family. Do a few prostrations. Every night, ask for forgiveness from each other. So when they leave the confines of your home, which eventually they will, right, by the grace of God, they will remember a repentant father and a forgiving father, right? Somebody who repents and someone who forgives. Their mistakes, your own mistakes, repentant of your own mistakes and forgiving their mistakes. So in this spiritual atmosphere that you can cultivate in your home because of your love for Christ, of your love for your spouse, of your love for your children, when they leave their home, they will miss that atmosphere. And they will say, what is it that my father had that I am missing in my own home? Perhaps it is Christ, that person that he always spoke about. Perhaps it's that church thing that he always went to. Okay, let me see if there's something there. So, excuse me, don't worry so much about making sure that they have the right faith or that they have the right whatever. Instead, your actions at home begin like planting little seeds into their hearts so that when they leave the home, these seeds begin to grow. They're nurtured at home. They're grown little, like little shrubs at home. But as they begin to grow more and more in the atmosphere outside of the home, they will come to miss that reality. Christ, who you had in your home, who you spoke about. Maybe at the dinner table, you read, I just read this, a small paragraph, share with them. These small things create that spiritual atmosphere, I believe, that will allow them to miss that when they leave and will yearn for Christ after that.
Needless to say, I married a Christian. She's Seventh-day Adventist,
Mm-hmm.
right? She's not Greek, which is, we can't help who we fall in love with. They believe in the Trinity. They have a couple different things. They keep the Sabbath. They don't eat pork, stuff like that. So now, in the beginning, it didn't bother me. And we were baptized as children. Our faith is our faith. We're both Christians, and we love Christ together. There's no difference. As I get older, I realize now I don't want her because I don't impose my will on anyone. I don't tell her what to wear or how to cut her hair or what to do. But I want her for herself to, not convert, but just come to church a little more often and see what we're about. It's always been kind of like, you could take the kids, that's fine. And it's not contemptuous. We don't argue. There's no like, I don't believe in that. It's just, you could take your children. Her father passed away, so they were raised in that faith. So I think she feels an allegiance to it. However, I know she does love Orthodoxy. It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
So my issue is, or my concern is, how do I help? How do I help her bring her, I say to come back home?
Yeah. If you are concerned about converting your spouse or your children, you will lose the game because Christianity is not about converting other people. It's about showing them the beauty and the love of Christ that they can either accept or reject. Because God gives us that freedom, we give that freedom to other people, even to our own spouse and even to our own children. I heard it that this quote that said that love is giving someone the ability, the freedom to fail. This is what Christ does in the garden when he plants Adam and Eve there. He gives them the freedom. He gives them the choice, right? What's the word? Autoxousia, something like that, like self-determination.
Yes.
So now when it comes to your spouse, my suggestion from what you have said, the limited information that I have, would be that you speak to your spouse not so much as, I want you to do this, but say, it means our children are only here for a couple of more years. Could we please go together as a family? Maybe 2 Sundays out of the month. You don't say anything else. You say, honey, I really want to do this. Could you help me with this? Okay, beautiful. Okay, so you see her. Slowly, the heart will change. Because in Orthodoxy, you have the fullness, you have the beauty, you have the love of Christ. And then when you're praying, this is what I was going to say about when you mentioned the story about your son when he saw you doing prostrations. Then you turn to your son. You want to do a couple with me? Let me show you what it's about, right? This way, you're not imposing, you're not converting, you're not doing anything. The aim is not to convert. The aim is to simply say, here is Christ. Look at him. Isn't he beautiful? If you want him, you can have him too. But it's not to say, come over here. This is Christ, not that. No, because the second it's an opposition, it's like we lose. No. Again, not
Yes.
about converting. So just say slowly, I really want to do this because you do, not because it's a lie, not because you're manipulating, because you really want your family to come to church. So say, honey, can you help me? I really want to bring the kids. We only have them for a couple more years. Can you help me with this? You know? And then when you're praying, honey, after you've prayed now for a little bit, your wife has seen you, and you say, honey, I feel like something's missing. I want you by my side. Can you pray with me? Maybe we can read a psalm together, something that you feel comfortable with. Right? Maybe it doesn't even have to be an Orthodox prayer. You can read the Psalms together, the scriptures, the Jesus prayer, which I'm sure she would be comfortable with. Something that invites the both of you to this relationship and union with Christ. That as you draw more deeply in love with Christ, she will become more deeply in love with you and with God. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. Of course. I never thought of that. I try to think as many things through, but that is leadership by example. I 100%. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that, Father. Thank you so much. Is our time up?
Yes.
Listen, what you're doing is amazing.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you. It's just refreshing. So every video I watch with my wife, we watch together.
That's awesome.
So we love it. Yeah, I watch with the kids. I forward it to them. We watch them together. So I appreciate you spreading the word. I appreciate your charisma, and I appreciate your love for our faith, for God.
Thank you, Nick. When you get a moment, please email me just the first names of your family, and I'll include you in my proskomidi.
Thank you so much. Pray for me, and I'll pray for you, Father. Thank you so much.
All right, God bless you.
Have a great day. Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.
It's just like, it's the struggle of, because I feel like I've heard so many Orthodox priests, so many fathers, so many church fathers say that the only salvation in the world is in our church. The only way that you can truly reach Jesus Christ, his body, his blood, is through our church. But for me, I almost feel like all these different sects of Christianity are God simply trying to reach out to different parts of people and almost like adapt to their cultures, if that makes sense. I don't know. Like, I don't want it to come off as like being heretic, because I do really believe in Orthodoxy, and I do really love our faith. But I feel like it's almost like not for everyone, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can understand what you're saying. And it's some valid points, right? Like maybe this is just God's way of trying to include everybody. And the world. Yeah. So many thoughts come,
Sure.
of course, with this. The first thought is that there's only one person that saves, and that's Jesus Christ.
Right.
So salvation comes through Jesus Christ. Like, that's the premise number one. Salvation comes through Jesus Christ. Okay.
Right.
Now we have to ask ourselves, what does that mean? Salvation comes through Jesus Christ. And Christ puts it very clearly, like, unless you're born of the water and the Spirit, you have no part in me. Unless you eat my body and drink my blood, you have no part in me. So he makes it very clear that there are some prerequisites to entering into this relationship with Christ.
Right.
Those two being baptism, and the other being the Eucharist, his very body and blood. Okay. Now we have to ask ourselves, in what churches do we find those prerequisites? And then you can already begin to, like, baptism, almost every Christian denomination that I know of includes baptism. But the Eucharist is very limited. All right. So either Christ was, like, when Christ says the words, unless you eat my body and drink my blood, you have no part in me, the disciples immediately responded with, this is a harsh saying. Who can accept this? Because they're saying that you're essentially saying that we should be cannibals. And then it says in the scriptures, in the Gospel of John, many people decided to leave him that day, many of his disciples. If he was a person that was trying to be this all-inclusive God, he would immediately retract that saying and say, no, I just meant it symbolically. Don't worry about it. Come back. No, he doesn't stop them from leaving. Instead, he turns to the disciples and he says, do you also wish to leave? To which the disciples respond, no, you have the words of eternal life. Where else can we go? So Christ, it's not the church by that I mean like the people. It's not the people that set the parameters of the union with Christ. It's Christ himself who sets the parameters. because he is the head, and therefore
Right.
he ascribes. If you want to be, he doesn't say like. He says, if you love me, then you'll do my commandments.
Right.
If you want to be a part of the church, my body, don't think about it like a jurisdiction or something right now, but if you want to be part of my body, then these are the modes of entry and sustainability, which is like entry, which is baptism, and being sustained in the body is through the reception of the Holy Eucharist. So he sets that. So again, Christ is salvation. He sets the prerequisites by which to enter his body. And he is the mode of our existence and our very salvation. So when you excuse me, when you have those things in place, which are the very words of Christ, then you kind of like narrow it down to the handful of churches
Right.
that
I see.
that have that. And you have the Orthodox Church, you have the Catholic Church that also makes roughly that claim, and maybe you have some other Christian denomination.
Right.
But by and large, most Protestant churches don't believe in the actual
Yeah.
body and blood of Christ.
And forgive me if I'm going over time, please stop me. But for me, I do almost feel like, though, out of the mercy of Christ and him being ever so merciful, that if someone was, say, had enough faith but not enough knowledge to know that you truly need to drink his blood and eat his body to be saved, I feel like Jesus would be able to mercifully grant an exception to, say, a believing Protestant who tries their best to strive to reach God, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think we should be very careful on both ends to say either that person is going to hell or that person, God will save that person. Because
we can't judge. Yeah.
Absolutely. On both accounts, we become the judge and the executioner. And this is not a good thing.
Let
God worry about that. God is able to save a thief on the cross through his confession of words.
That's true.
Why would he not save someone else? But it's not for me to say, right? I, as a follower, let's say, of the Orthodox faith, as a priest of the Orthodox faith, I don't say, do whatever you want as long as you have faith. I say, these are the words of Christ. If you love Christ, then you will do his commandments. That means following in we can use the word, the Orthodox word, the tradition that he has given us, the very foundation which he have given us. If you decide to do something else, may it be blessed. May God bless it. May he use it to some extent for good. But we know that here and now is how we receive Christ. Here and now is how we come to know him.
That when it comes to confession, there's something that really confuses me because I keep confessing pretty much the same sins because I keep committing them over and over again. And one of the priests at my parish said that I don't have to confess if I don't actually mean it. So this kind of makes me feel anxious because I do mean it. It's just that it's things that I have a problem with because they keep reoccurring and I don't really know what to do about it. So I don't know how to phrase the question, but if that makes sense.
Sure. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're asking if I'm committing the same sin, do I have to confess it, or is my priest wrong about this? Am I getting that correct?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay. I still go to confession, thank God, to my spiritual father, and I still confess typically the same sins. And I heard one priest put it this way very beautifully. I believe it was Father Stephen Freeman. He said, someone had asked him, Father, I go to you, I confess the exact same sin over and over and over again. And he was going to confession pretty regularly. And he says, I don't know what to do, right? It's the same sin again and again and again. And the priest responds so beautifully. He says, the reason you're confessing the same sin over is because you're a human being. If you were telling me a different sin every confession, I would think that you might be schizophrenic. Not that he would actually have some sort of like mental illness, but the idea is that you're not a different person every time that when you go to confession. You're the same person. You have the same attachments. The hope And the blessing and the grace that God gives us is that over time with confession, these unhealthy attachments or unnatural attachments over time will diminish. So that as you confess maybe the same sin over and over a lifetime, that sin may be confessed more irregularly. Or, God willing, by the grace of God and only by his grace, will that particular attachment or passion, as we use in the Orthodox Church, be completely uprooted. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So don't worry if you're confessing the same sin. Just focus on, at least what my spiritual father even tells me, just repentance. Focus on prayer. Focus on the good that you can do in the service of Christ, rather than trying to abolish this particular sin. As Saint Porphyrius says, like, focus on Christ and the light, and don't focus so much on the sin and the darkness.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
My next question is about intrusive thoughts. Is that it's something I've struggled with pretty much all my life. About it's kind of like, for instance, if I walk across the street, I have this thought popping into my head that if I don't get across the street before the signal turns red, then something terrible is going to happen. Or it can be intimate, sexual thoughts in nature that can be very intrusive, and it can be related to someone at work or someone at church, and it's really, really uncomfortable because I don't want to have these thoughts, and it's not exactly people that I'm necessarily attracted to or anything like that, but it's kind of like, it's like a compulsive thing that keeps happening. So I don't know, is it demonic in nature, or is there a way I can be free from these intrusive thoughts, or I don't know what to do about them?
Yeah. Almost everything that I tell people is like, number one, go to your spiritual father. To go, confess, say these things, see what his thoughts are as somebody who may know you over the span of your life and over the many confessions that you have offered and in your participation in the church services. The thing that I'll tell you is from my own personal experience. When I was younger, I would go towards, I'll be crossing over this bridge, and oftentimes I would see this pole. And as I'm driving, I would always say, it would be so easy to just swerve the car into the pole and crash, or just swerve the car into the river and just, whatever happens. So the fathers say that the thoughts have four origins. The first is demonic. Almost every intrusive thought that we receive is of demonic origin, the devils and the demons and those influences. The environment, ourselves, and then God, because we also have angelic thoughts, heavenly thoughts, divine thoughts, the saints, and as such. Those thoughts are intrusive, that cause fear, that cause harm, are disruptive, or can cause us a disturbance within us. Almost all of the fathers would attribute those thoughts to demonic inclinations. So a good recipe to kind of like follow, which again, just taught by my spiritual father, was when a bad thought enters your mind, internally, be completely apathetic. Don't even, as best as you can, don't even be disturbed by the thought. And if it reaches a state of disturbance, and if the thought persists and continues, then you can say something along the lines of like spitting at the thought in your mind. Like if you can imagine in your imagination spitting at the thought, disgusting, and then you say something like, "Get behind me, Satan," which is the words that Christ used in the Gospels, and then immediately switch into the Jesus prayer: "Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner." This is one way to combat like the spiritual element of it. The other way is to maybe consider, are these thoughts, are they stemming from some sort of maybe biological or neurological, whatever like I'm thinking of like OCD, because I know that particular people, I know someone that struggles with OCD, and they have to turn the lights on and off a certain time. Otherwise, they believe something bad will happen in their house. I'm not saying that that's what you have, but I'm saying it could be in conjunction with your spiritual father, something that you can reference or ask. Might this be a good idea to pursue? It may not be, but in your relationship with the two of you, you can discern that.
So it's kind of a two-part question. How did you come to know God? And then how did you discern your calling into the priesthood? Because I know that's kind of like, I'm a catechumen, and where I'm at in catechesis, we kind of just learned about the calling to the priesthood, the sacrament of ordination. So I'm just wondering, how did you discern that betwixt like your different desires and talents?
Yeah. Good question. What the first one was, how did I come to know God?
Yes.
What do you mean by that? Just like learning about
Kind
him?
of like your testimony of like how he worked in your life that led you to believing in him and coming to the church.
Yeah. The first thought that comes to my mind is that I'm not saying this in as a form of humility. I truly mean this. I think that my gift, that what I have received as a form of my belief in him, is truly just a gift, nothing more. And so, which makes it a little bit easier to not judge people for when they don't believe. Let's say a lot of our belief comes from his own grace and his own mercy. Just like that man in the parable, not in the parable, in the scripture that says, "I believe, Lord, help my unbelief." I was born in South America, Colombia, and there I had no option to. There was no possibility to be exposed to the Orthodox faith. It wasn't until my mother decided to come to America, and by happenstance, she married my now stepfather. And we were baptized into the Orthodox Church. Had it not been for that meeting, I would have never been exposed to the Orthodox Church. And that's all providential. It's all his grace and his mercy. Yeah.
Yeah.
A different move and I would not be here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, because down there it's all Catholic, and
yeah,
I'm not even sure if evangelicals are down there too much, huh?
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I mean, the last time I was there was when I was 6 years old. But honestly, for me, it changed when by the time I was 18, I was deciding where to go to school. I ended up going to Helena College, where Holy Cross, the seminary, is also located. When I was there, I had gotten in contact with a few people who were still some of my good friends that had gone there specifically for the seminary, and they were talking to me about their religious life and all these things. One of them gave me a book called A Night in the Desert of the Holy Mountain. This book utterly changed my life. It was all about the Jesus prayer and the mysticism of the Orthodox Church. When I delved into that, my life began to be transformed. And more like I felt like I began to play a role in God's providential epiphany in my life. So it was beautiful. Okay. It was after that point that I got a spiritual father, began confessing, attending church services more regularly. In that relationship between me and my spiritual father, to your second question, is when I think it was maybe 6 or 7 years, probably 6 years in. It was my second to last year before graduating seminary. So after I already graduated from the college, I'm in confession, confessing, my sins, and my spiritual father turns to me and says, one day when you're a priest, you're going to have to deal with the same things. Excuse me. Before that, I had never considered the priesthood as a viable option. But his words, I think, by the grace of God, again, providential, put a seed in my heart and in my mind to have that as a possibility, right?
Okay.
So I think it was really his words and his guidance that allowed for that, for the possibility of the priesthood to be open. I never had a calling in the sense of like I never felt or heard God's voice. It was never like some sort of divine revelation. It was certainly like the voice of my spiritual father, or rather Christ speaking through my spiritual father. Maybe in that way, I would put it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like you approached it kind of step by step, just through humility, kind of taking what God was giving you.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say humility. I think it was just ignorance at the very beginning. And then in guidance with my spiritual father and in relationship with the church and my bishop, those things slowly got revealed.
Yep. Okay. Very cool. Because that's something I kind of am struggling with my walk, because like coming from an evangelical church into the Orthodox Church, it's like the main thing that's been put on my heart is just taking it as it comes and not expecting anything, not putting myself into it too much. So that speaks to me a lot. So I appreciate you answering that. That's
Sure.
very cool.
Yeah.
But I didn't have too many other questions. I thought that would be a little longer. But what advice would you have for a catechumen such as me? I've only been in catechesis for a couple months now. So I've been learning about the Orthodox for a while, or the Orthodox Church for a while, but just getting into it, it's a lot of culture shock with
Yeah.
the iconography and everything venerating. I understand a lot of it, just getting into practice, it's rather difficult for me to kind of rewire my brain with all that. So what advice would you have for me to just kind of get more, I don't know what word I'm looking for, comfortable or more, because I guess what advice would you have for
Yeah,
me?
sure. A thought that comes to my mind is find a church, a community that you feel you can be a part of, right? Then find a priest that you love and you respect and you can pour out your heart to, right? For me, my life was transformed because of my relationship with my spiritual father. And so I encourage people to pursue that life-giving relationship. Find a priest that you can confess to. Find a priest that you can talk to. Find a priest that can temper your zeal, which often many catechumens have at the very beginning. They want to do more prayers, more prostrations, more everything. That needs to be tempered with someone who is experienced, and offer so that the fire, that the spark that the Holy Spirit has, for lack of a better word, sparked in your heart, is not overburdened and suffocated because of the logs that we put on top of it. Find a priest that can discern very beautifully in not a analytical manner, but a priest that can discern and say, okay, try this, and then slowly add into the fire so that it begins to burn brightly and more sustainably over the years, rather than someone being so strict at the very beginning that you may be burned out within a year or two. It would be horrible for you to join the church and then within a couple of years leave.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. That's God works through his servants, man. Because like I didn't know what I was going to get from asking that question, because I thought I was kind of going to get something a little more vague, but that spoke to my situation, because I do feel like I'm kind of, like you said, overburdened is the word you used. And with all this new stuff, kind of to submit myself to the ways and the spiritual activities of the church. So I want to do as much as I possibly can and delve myself into it. And so that spoke to me a lot right there, just kind of looking for the way reality sort of fits to that.
Yeah, thank God. So, just remember, like, as that catechumen and as everything that you're learning, like, you may not even retain all of it, and that's okay, because more knowledge doesn't mean that you have a more intimate experience with God. Period. Just because you have all the facts does not now mean you know who God is, right? Only an authentic experience lived inside of a community, of a church, in relationship with a priest who's guiding you, a local bishop, and all these things.
So my first question, me and my wife, we've been attending Orthodox services recently, and I hear the argument that Orthodoxy is opposed to emotionalism, and like this, I hear the term like rock concert type worship service. But when we attend Orthodox services, I struggle with like hearing the chanting and the choir and stuff. How is that not a form of emotionalism in the same way Protestants are worshiping? So what's the difference there, and how is that not some form of emotional manipulation in the worship the same way Protestants are worshiping? Does that make sense?
Yeah. How do you define emotionalism?
So I would say like a certain way the worship is conducted that is to manipulate the audience rather than a genuine spiritual experience. So I'm just trying to understand what the difference is there.
Okay. So a couple of thoughts come to mind. The first is that if you have ever attended a divine liturgy, one thing that you'll primarily notice is how boring it can be, especially at the very beginning when things seem very new, and all these things. So the fact that it doesn't have this emotional appeal, it almost makes it feel uninvested. I'm speaking from personal experience. I mean, it's not the same case for everyone. So therefore, not every piece of hymn, not everything that is uttered, not everything that is said is there to keep you 1 second longer, and then a minute, and then, for whatever. It's not there to, sometimes you may leave the church feeling worse than when you came, right? Sometimes you don't leave with an emotional high all the time, or you're not always feeling this emotional depth that you may get from some Protestant hymns. The depth that we experience in Orthodox worship transcends the emotions. It includes the emotions because it is part of our humanity. So to say that we're not gonna include the emotions is wrong. So the hymns I think there's something called text painting, where if as the note goes down, it plays into a particular, like the word sin, the note goes down. So it incorporates some emotionality, even especially like, let's say for like the funeral service. Those hymns are so beautiful, speaking about the repose of the person and the passage of the soul into the presence of God. But it is not our primary focus. We utilize the senses, but it is not. We don't stay there. Our focus is Christ in that sense. So while there may be elements of emotionalism, I don't think it's the primary focus of Orthodox worship.
Okay, gotcha. Another question about kind of the worship in Orthodox service. It's focused towards the altar.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed, like, obviously the Orthodox believe in the real presence of the Eucharist. But how is it that if God is everywhere, if he's omnipresent, how is it that he is centered upon the altar in worship exactly? Like, what makes that the center point of worship, and why should that be the center point of worship compared to the way Protestants worship?
In what ways are you comparing them to the Protestant church? Like, what are the Protestants doing in comparison?
I come from a Southern Baptist background,
Mm-hmm.
and the center point of the worship is oftentimes the message, the pulpit. Mm-hmm. And in attending Orthodox services, I see that the center point of the worship is upon the altar. And I'm curious as to why is that the center point of the worship service, and how is God uniquely present there in the worship service when he's present? How is that the focal point of his presence when his spiritual presence is everywhere? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. A great way to think about it is that the way that the church is structured is a physical representation of a spiritual reality. So the church has like this 3-part structure. You've got like the entrance, which is called the narthex, and you've got like the nave, then you've got the altar itself, and then you've got like the physical altar table on which the gifts of God, the body and blood of Christ, are put. So that is a physical representation of a spiritual reality. That spiritual reality is the presence of the heart. So while the whole organ of the heart, the spiritual heart of a person, is incorporated, God is found everywhere present, let's say, in that area. He is uniquely experienced and seen and witnessed in what the fathers of the church called the nous, which is the altar of the heart, is one way to think about it. So all of our attention is directed towards the east, specifically the altar, because it is there that we come into communion with God. That is the very beginning from where the Holy Spirit descends and transforms the bread and the wine into the body and blood of Christ. From that point flows out our entire sacramental life. Just as when Christ was on the cross, which we actually have right behind. Typically, there's an icon of the crucifixion behind the altar as a representation and symbolism of this reality. That just as when Christ was pierced, the two main things that came out of his side were water for baptism and blood for the Eucharist. So again, the Eucharist is the thing that makes the altar holy. It's the thing that sanctifies that space, right?
Okay, gotcha.
Just as, sorry, just to add really quickly, just as if we were to celebrate the liturgy somewhere else, right? If we got the blessing of a bishop, if we were to celebrate the liturgy outside, the focal point doesn't become anything else but whatever it is that we're placing the gifts on.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see. Another question I have is, it seems to me that the understanding of grace and orthodoxy is different from my background. From my background, it seems grace is more of a disposition of God towards you as the Christian.
Okay.
And in orthodoxy, it seems sort of like a dynamic reality that we engage with or participate in. So can you help me with my background understand what exactly is the grace of God that we are participating in? Is it only the Eucharist, or is it like us becoming more virtuous through our actions? Do you understand the question?
I do. Can you explain very briefly how a Protestant understands grace? You said disposition. What does that mean?
Well, from my background, it's an imputation of righteousness, and that imputation then changes it changes God's disposition towards us as Christians. So it seems to me that grace is a change in disposition of God towards us as sanctified believers. But in Orthodoxy, it seems different than that. It seems there's something more dynamic that is happening where I've heard the term participation before in certain Orthodox apologists. It's like a participation with the believers and with God. And so I was wondering if you could help me understand that and elaborate on that and understand what exactly that grace is.
Yeah. I'll use an analogy for this, and I hope it's helpful. We can think of grace as the sun in the sky that shines, and the earth as our spiritual atmosphere. At times, we feel the grace very keenly because as the sun shines on our skin, we, to some extent, participate in that reality. The sun is sharing part of what it is with me when the light travels through space and touches my skin and all these things, right? So just using that as an analogy. And again, just as grace is not, it is always present in a sense, but because of our sin, of our thoughts, of our dispositions, this atmosphere that we live in on earth, just as it's covered by clouds, can also shroud the grace of Christ. So God is ever willing to give of himself to you. But oftentimes our own disposition, our own thoughts, our own spiritual atmosphere often blocks that from happening. Now, grace is more than just that. It is participation in the life of Christ to the extent that it is possible to the extent that it is possible for a human to do so. So the grace can increase, but there's also in many of the lives of the saints where grace departs, right? After, let's say, sinning, grace is the thing that it is the energy of God that allows us to perform greater actions and love for others and return back to himself. And when this grace is gone, the very actions that we did prior seem so much more laborious. It is the saying of Christ. Grace is literally the saying of Christ when he says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. For my burden is easy and my yoke is light." The only way that the burden becomes easy and the only way that the yoke becomes light is through his grace. Otherwise, if we strived on our own, we would never succeed. Right? It is something that he imparts into us that allows us to continue fighting the good fight, if that makes sense.